Welcome to Threads of Truth, where real-life mysteries meet internet speculation. Today, we are walking through one of the most complex and, frankly, troubling missing persons cases in modern Canadian history, the disappearance of Emma Fillipoff. It's a case that happened over a decade ago now, in Victoria, British Columbia, on November 28, 2012. But the details, the few facts that we have, they still resonate because they are just so profoundly unresolved.
It feels immediate, doesn't it? And I think that's because of the nature of the evidence itself. I mean, when you look at Emma's final 24 hours, you're presented with these facts that just should not coexist. You have this very detailed preparation, which suggests a plan, for travel or departure. And then that's immediately followed by the behavior of a person in an acute, completely uncontrolled crisis.
Exactly. It's that perplexing juxtaposition. On one hand, she's buying essential supplies, a prepaid phone, a pretty sizable prepaid credit card, and she moves her vehicle to a safe central location.
These are the actions of someone who is calculating a move.
Yes. And then just hours later, she's seen walking barefoot in downtown Victoria, fleeing a taxi, and is clearly in extreme emotional distress.
So the central question really for the investigation and for everyone who follows the case is still this. Was her calculated preparation just a red herring that got completely overridden by a catastrophic mental health breakdown?
Or did the visibility of that breakdown, her vulnerability, make her a target for foul play?
That's the fork in the road.
Our mission today is to explore those final hours, integrating the original sources to really understand the timeline, the evidence of her mental state, and all the theories that came from it. But the single most critical and I think painful question we have to examine is this. How did a 45-minute interaction with uniformed police officers become the very last confirmed moment Emma Fillipoff was seen alive? It's a moment of institutional intervention that failed. And the gap that's left afterward is just vast. It's filled only by uncertainty and, of course, public speculation.
Well,
okay, let's unpack this timeline. And I think we need to start with the context of her life in Victoria at that time. Emma was 26 years old, a trained chef, and from all accounts, a very bright and capable young woman.
And we really need to stress she was not destitute. She had financial resources.
That's a critical point.
It's vital because it separates this case from so many others that might involve extreme homelessness or, economic desperation. This wasn't a case of necessity driving her decisions. It was a profound psychological shift.
She had money, but she chose this transient, almost nomadic existence, often staying at the Sandy Merriman House Women's Shelter.
Right, and she'd been doing that on and off since early 2012.
And for anyone who doesn't know Victoria, Sandy Merriman House is a secure facility. It's run by the Women's Transition Housing and Support Services. It's meant to be a place of safety.
So the fact that she was choosing to be in that environment, even though she had other options, it tells you something about her internal state, doesn't it? She was seeking refuge, not just a roof over her head.
Exactly. And this period leading up to November, it marked a really worrying deterioration in her mental state.
Friends, staff at the shelter, they all began observing this dramatic change in her personality. The sources, they describe her as becoming intensely withdrawn. She was exhibiting this constant, almost palpable fear.
And signs of paranoia.
Escalating paranoia, absolutely. This was so much more than just feeling down. This was behavioral disorganization.
Were there specific things that the staff were seeing, things that suggested this level of distress? I mean, we hear about these highly erratic actions.
Yeah, there were. One specific behavior that was noted was the frantic moving of furniture. She would move things in and out of the shelter. It was just this purposeless, agitated activity.
But no real goal.
No goal at all. She was also seen exhibiting these avoidance behaviors, constantly looking over her shoulder. She was seen at the nearby YMCA repeatedly, sort of entering and exiting, but always checking the street outside.
Like she was waiting for someone. Or avoiding someone.
Exactly. Like she believed she was being monitored or tracked by someone or something. The consensus, when you pull together the witness reports and her own writings, it really points to Emma likely suffering an acute, undiagnosed psychotic break.
And this was fueled by overwhelming stress and depression.
And this generalized fear she was living with. And that's the most likely medical interpretation. When investigators later reviewed her journal entries, which often chronicled this deep psychological pain and long-term struggles, they made a really crucial finding.
Which was?
While she wrote a lot about her difficulties, there was no concrete evidence of planning or any intent towards self-harm, no suicidal ideation.
That's so important.
It is, because it heavily suggests that her flight wasn't driven by a desire to end her life, but maybe a desperate attempt to preserve it, to escape a threat that she perceived as very, very real.
Whether it was an external threat or something coming from inside her own mind.
Right. We just don't know.
So let's focus on those last few days leading up to November 28th, because the distress, it really seemed to intensify, and it focused on her communication with her mother, Shelley Fillipoff, who was living all the way across the country in Perth, Ontario.
Yeah, that communication dynamic was, it was just heartbreakingly chaotic. She would call her mother in tears, begging to come home, saying she needed to escape Victoria in whatever situation she was in.
And then what would happen?
Then, within hours, she would completely reverse course. She'd call back and insist vehemently that she was going to stay in Victoria, that she would deal with her situation on her own.
That push-pull dynamic, that inability to commit to safety, it just showcases the psychological conflict she must have been experiencing. And you can't imagine the agony Shelley was going through, thousands of miles away.
It's really the hallmark of a person who is losing their grasp on reality, or someone who is struggling under just immense internal pressure. The decision-making process is fundamentally fractured.
She wants safety, she wants refuge, but the fear, the paranoia is preventing her from actually accepting it.
Yes. And then her final reported words to her mother during a call on either the 27th or the morning of the 28th, they are just devastating. She said, "I don't know how I can face you."
Wow.
That single statement, it just carries so much emotional weight. It suggests shame, maybe guilt, or maybe just a recognition of her own deteriorating state. It doesn't scream, "I am in immediate physical danger," but it's a clear signal of, "I am in a deep emotional and psychological crisis."
It really paints a picture of a young woman carrying this just intolerable burden right up to the moment she vanished. So now we get to November 28th itself. This is the day the preparations begin. And this is where we see that momentary clarity that stands in such sharp contrast to all the distress.
Yes, this is where the detective work becomes so frustrating, because on that final day, she took several very methodical steps. First, she purchased a prepaid cell phone, burner phone, essentially.
Suggesting a desire for untraceable communication.
Right. But critically, that phone was never activated.
Never turned on.
Never. She also purchased a prepaid credit card and loaded it with $200.
$200 in 2012 is a decent amount of money. It's certainly enough for an emergency bus ticket out of town or a night or two in a motel. It strongly implies she was preparing for movement, not just trying to survive on the street.
Absolutely. It signals an intent to travel or at least survive for a short period without using her bank accounts. But the most intriguing detail for me concerning her preparation involves her van. A red 1993 Mazda MPV.
She hired a tow truck to move it, right? Why? Why move the van at all?
Well, the van was originally parked in Souk, which is a good distance outside of Victoria proper. She paid to have it towed and parked specifically inside the secure Central Chateau Victoria parking garage.
Okay, so if you're planning to just abandon everything and disappear, why would you pay to secure your vehicle?
Exactly. And if you're planning to travel far, why leave the van behind in Victoria? This detail is so complex, it suggests, two possibilities. Either she intended to come back for the van, or she wanted to secure her only home, her main possessions, before some kind of short-term necessary departure.
It's just too calculated to be random.
Way too calculated. But then, when that van was later found, it contained nearly all of her essential belongings.
The laptop,
Her passport.
her camera,
Yeah.
all her clothes, important documents.
If she was planning a genuine permanent flight from Victoria, she would have needed those items. You don't leave your passport behind if you're trying to start over.
That contradiction is the absolute pivot point of this whole case. The van is moved and secured, which suggests a plan to leave something behind or come back to it. But the way she just abruptly left everything essential, it suggests that whatever plan she had was catastrophically aborted.
Either by her own rapid mental deterioration or by some kind of external interference.
Let's move to the final documented sequence of events on the evening of November 28th. This all starts around 6 p.m.
Right. She left Sandy Merriman House, where she'd been staying, and just hours after she had secured the van, she hails a taxi. She tells the driver she wants to go to the Victoria International Airport.
Which again confirms the idea that travel was the immediate goal.
It does. But then she exited the taxi almost immediately, not even a block away.
And what reason did she give?
She claimed she didn't have the fare. And this is just the height of illogic, isn't it? Given that she had just loaded that $200 prepaid card and likely had other cash on her.
Why get in a cab, ask for a long trip to the airport, only to claim you can't pay the minimum starting fare?
It points so strongly to a sudden, overwhelming psychological event, a panic attack, maybe a hallucination, or just a sudden, paralyzing fear that physically prevented her from continuing that journey. She chose to just walk away and abandon the taxi.
And shortly after that, the next confirmed sighting places her in a very visible, very public location in front of the Fairmont Empress Hotel. It's a major landmark in downtown Victoria.
And crucially, she was barefoot.
In late November, in Victoria.
It's a giant red flag. It shows that she was not prioritizing her own physical comfort or safety at all. Witnesses noted her erratic behavior. She was seen entering and leaving the Empress Hotel multiple times, appearing completely disoriented, just wandering in a state of crisis.
And this behavior was so alarming that it prompted someone to intervene.
It did. This brings us to the moment that just seals the tragedy. Around 7:15 p.m., an acquaintance of hers named Dennis Quay called 911. He reported her state. He described a young woman in severe distress.
So a formal police response was initiated.
Yes. Vic PD officers arrived. They located Emma. They then spent approximately 45 minutes speaking with her on the street, trying to assess her mental state. We know they were trying to determine if she met the legal threshold for an involuntary commitment or a mental health hold.
And 45 minutes. That's a long time. It's enough time to build some rapport, but it's also enough time for an individual in crisis to maybe mask their true level of disorientation, to try and appear fine.
It is. And the outcome was that the officers concluded she was not a threat to herself or to others. They felt she was lucid enough to make her own decisions, and they allowed her to leave.
This decision, even if it was based on the legal parameters of the time, is the most agonizing point in the entire timeline.
It is. She walked away from the police, her last confirmed contact, and vanished into the night around 8 p.m.
And we also need to talk about a later piece of evidence here, the surveillance video from the Empress Hotel area. Did that offer any clues about her state or if she was alone?
It did. And this is where the foul play theory gets its first real physical hook. The surveillance footage confirms her distressed state for sure, but it also captured a man standing nearby, appearing to watch her as she spoke with the police officers.
Watching the interaction.
Just watching. Now, police were never able to definitively link this man to Emma or her disappearance, but just the visual detail that someone was monitoring this distressed young woman from a short distance away, it adds a chilling layer to that final sighting.
So she leaves the police, she walks away alone, and the surveillance footage hints that someone was potentially observing her vulnerability. The timeline just ends there, and it leaves us only with the theories that try to explain how she just dematerialized. So once Emma walked away from those officers, the factual trail just runs completely cold. And that vacuum of information has been filled by really three major theoretical paths that have been pursued by investigators and the public. Let's start with the one that's most strongly supported by her documented behavior. The psychological distress or voluntary disappearance theory.
Right. This theory basically posits that Emma was experiencing such profound paranoia or maybe active hallucinations that she felt she absolutely had to flee. Not from an external reality, but from her own internal terror. Her entire demeanor leading up to the 28th, the anxiety, the avoidance, the contradictory plans, it all makes this the most plausible explanation for her state of mind.
But if she vanished voluntarily, why would she leave all her essentials, her passport, her ID, all of it in the van?
Because a person who's experiencing a psychotic break often acts completely illogically. The need to flee may have suddenly just overshadowed any methodical preparation she'd done earlier. The priority shifts from a planned trip to immediate chaotic flight.
Okay.
She might have convinced herself that the perceived threat was so imminent that she couldn't afford a single moment to go back and get her bag. Or maybe she even feared those items were somehow compromised or being tracked.
It's a tragic narrative where she intentionally disappears to escape an enemy that might not have even been real. only to become a victim of her own disordered state, wandering into misadventure.
That's the theory. It explains the lack of a struggle, but
It doesn't explain how she simply vanished from a busy metropolitan area without a single verifiable sighting afterward, which is why the counter theory, the foul play or abduction hypothesis, gains so much traction.
exactly. The abduction theory hinges entirely on her vulnerability. She was highly visible, she was barefoot, distressed, walking alone late at night right after an interaction with the police. An opportunistic stranger could have so easily convinced her or physically compelled her into a vehicle nearby.
So what are the specific pieces of evidence that push the needle toward foul play? We have that prepaid card incident.
Yes, that happened about a week later, on December 5th, 2012. The $200 prepaid card Emma purchased was used for a small transaction at a gas station near the Juan de Fuca Recreation Center.
And that's in Colwood, which is a suburb just west of Victoria.
Right. It's not immediate downtown Victoria, but it's part of the broader metro area. So it suggests that the card, and potentially Emma, had moved out of the downtown core.
It suggested that someone had it.
Someone had possession of her recent purchase. Police were able to track down and interview the individual who used the card. His story was that he found the card discarded on the roadside near a bus stop.
And did they believe him?
After a thorough investigation, police determined he had no connection to Emma. So while it was a massive lead, it ultimately didn't confirm foul play. But it does leave this gap. How did that recently purchased card, which she was presumably carrying, end up just thrown on the side of a road?
It's a loose end. And then we have the infamous green shirt man, which emerged much, much later, ending a completely different city.
This incident is highly unusual, and it remains a really significant focal point. It happened in May 2014, so over 18 months after Emma vanished, and it was in Vancouver's Gastown district, a ferry ride away from Victoria.
And what happened?
Two business owners saw a man aggressively tearing down one of Emma's missing person posters, and his statement to them was just alarming in its specificity and its malice.
He said something that implied he knew her.
He provided a quote that strongly implied personal knowledge, or at least a highly defensive stance. He reportedly said, "She's not missing, she's my girlfriend, and she ran away because she hates her parents."
That quote. It does two things. First, it suggests this possessive relationship, my girlfriend. And second, it tries to control the narrative by shifting blame to her family, implying she chose this because of some conflict.
It's classic manipulation language. I mean, whether he was a stalker or just some malicious prankster or genuinely involved, that quote immediately makes him a primary, albeit elusive, person of interest.
And he was caught on security footage wearing a distinctive green shirt, which is where the nickname comes from.
Yes. And the fact that Vic PD, a decade later in late 2023, released an updated sketch of this green shirt man, it signals they still view him as potentially holding a key to this puzzle.
They haven't discounted it, even with the time gap and the location difference.
Absolutely not. The release of a sketch after so much time means they believe this lead is strong enough to warrant reigniting public interest. It prevents the case from just being categorized as a voluntary mental health misadventure. If this man was involved, it suggests abduction, coercion, or maybe that Emma did successfully flee Victoria but then fell under the influence or control of someone else in Vancouver.
Which brings us to the third theoretical path, the accidental death scenario.
Yeah.
I mean, given the geography of Vancouver Island, this just can't be dismissed, especially for a person in her disoriented state.
No, you're right. Victoria sits right on the edge of significant wilderness. For someone who is barefoot, possibly hallucinating and seeking to flee, just wandering into the elements is a genuine risk. Hypothermia, injury, even drowning are all possibilities.
And the downtown core is coastal.
It is. If she wandered toward the harbor or the Strait of Juan de Fuca in her confusion, the consequences could be immediate and final. The wilderness around Victoria is dense. It's often impenetrable. If she wandered off a trail or into thick brush in her confused state, her remains might simply be undetectable even after all these years.
That's the tragedy of the accidental death hypothesis, isn't it?
Right.
It offers an explanation for why she hasn't been seen, but it's an explanation that comes from a lack of evidence, not the presence of it.
Exactly. It remains plausible given her mental state, but it's less satisfying for those of us seeking resolution through human agency, through a crime or an intentional act.
And what ultimately keeps this case so active in the public consciousness is the constant stream of unverified tips and sightings.
Oh, that persistent stream of tips is the lifeblood of online true crime communities. Every few months, someone reports a sighting in Vancouver and Alberta. I've even seen ones as far away as California.
While the police have to meticulously investigate these, none have ever been definitively verified.
Right. And they complicate the investigation by forcing police to use resources chasing ghosts. But they also keep the discussion highly visible and very emotional. And that visibility is driven so heavily by the expansive, tireless search efforts of her mother, Shelley Fillipoff.
Her campaign to find Emma is just monumental.
It is. She has maintained websites, spoken to media globally, and worked continuously with police and private investigators. That dedication means the case never truly goes cold for the public. It adds this profound emotional weight, and it transforms the mystery from a mere intellectual puzzle into this ongoing communal tragedy that people feel compelled to help solve.
So we've explored the facts and the theories that have grown around them. Now, let's try to synthesize what we know. If we look strictly at the source material, the documented paranoia, the acute distress, the lack of any immediate physical evidence of a struggle, which of these theories hold the most immediate weight in a professional investigation?
Well, chronologically, the evidence leans very heavily toward the severe mental health crisis, leading to some form of disorganized flight or misadventure. I mean, her actions were fundamentally illogical.
Refusing the taxi fare when she had money.
Wandering barefoot, fleeing the security of the shelter she'd been using. This psychological turmoil is documented by multiple witnesses. It's the most solid thing we have.
The greatest obstacle, though, to closing the book on voluntary disappearance is that pair of external anomalies. The prepaid card popping up a week later, and then the green shirt man offering that bizarre quote 18 months later.
Precisely. Those two events, they introduce the element of external human agency, either an opportunist who just happened to find the card or an individual with specific knowledge of Emma's situation. They introduce just enough ambiguity to mandate that investigators cannot categorize this as a clean case of suicide or misadventure.
The fundamental difficulty of Emma's case lies right there, in that unique contradiction. Her intent was clearly to travel or leave, but her methods were utterly disorganized and irrational.
And that's the core tension. The active investigation, which still involves Vic PD, private investigators, and her mother, continues specifically because they have to resolve this. Was the preparatory stage completed before the mental health crisis hit its peak? Or was the crisis the reason the plan was cut short, leaving her vulnerable to an opportunist, like maybe the green shirt man?
Was she fleeing the police, convinced they were part of her perceived threat? Or was she intercepted immediately after they left, precisely because she was now alone, barefoot, and so visibly distressed?
It's the key question.
And this brings us to the most painful and unavoidable discussion. That institutional intersection. Those 45 minutes Emma spent with the Vic PD officers. This is the last concrete record we have of her.
It's the critical juncture. Emma was reported by Dennis Quay as being in severe distress. That's a statement that should trigger a very specific response protocol. The officers conducted a street assessment, and they determined she was not a threat to herself or others.
To understand why they let her go, we have to look at the legal context in British Columbia at the time. What did the officers need to see to justify an involuntary psychiatric hold?
They needed to meet an extremely high threshold. Typically, it requires visible evidence that the person is in imminent danger, either actively violent or articulating a specific, verifiable suicidal intent.
And Emma was, despite her distress, articulate and nonviolent.
Exactly. She was exhibiting paranoia and confusion, but the legal framework is restrictive. If she was able to state that she was fine and wanted to walk away, the officers were often legally constrained to allow her to do so. They were acting within the letter of the law.
But arguably against the spirit of community care.
Absolutely. So the gap isn't necessarily police negligence, but a failure of the system. It's a protocol gap, where a person in a visible psychotic break who can't accurately gauge their own danger falls right through the cracks because they don't meet the stringent legal requirements for forced detention.
The consequence was immediate and tragic.
It was. Had they been able to detain her and transport her for a mandatory psychiatric assessment, even if only for a few hours, she would have been safe from the streets that night. By allowing her to walk away alone in the dark, the responsibility for her safety was ceded back to her, at the very moment she was least capable of managing it.
It raises these profound questions about the training and the legal tools that are available to law enforcement when they encounter individuals experiencing severe mental health crises. I mean, they're being asked to be triage experts in moments of high volatility.
And the wrong decision has devastating results, as we see here. It really highlights the need for integrated crisis teams. Back in 2012, that level of systemic support just wasn't always available on the street.
Emma was so clearly signaling extreme distress to everyone she encountered.
Everyone. Her mother, the taxi driver, shelter staff, the concerned acquaintance who called 911, and finally the police. The fact that all those signals culminated in her being left alone in downtown Victoria forces us to re-examine how we, as a society, protect the vulnerable.
So what does this case ultimately teach us about unsolved mysteries and the human element at their core?
I think Emma Fillipoff's disappearance is a mirror. It reflects our own societal failures in managing mental health and missing person protocols. When the clues point equally toward self-protection, chaotic flight, and potential victimization, the uncertainty just creates immense pain, and it forces you, the listener, to consider the ultimate question of community responsibility.
When a person cannot articulate their own danger.
Exactly. When they can't see it or can't say it, what obligation do we have to intervene and hold them safe, regardless of the legal constraints? Emma's vanishing acts as this perpetual reminder that often the last person seen is the person who should have been saved.
This has been a deeply challenging and, I think, a crucial case to examine. It forces us to confront the intersection of mental illness, legal boundaries, and devastating ambiguity. We join the Fillipoff family in sincerely hoping for resolution.
And we have to acknowledge the immense effort put forth by Shelley Fillipoff and all the investigators to keep this search active and meaningful.
Thank you for exploring this complex case with us. Join us next time as we examine the case of Brandon Lawson, the 911 call that still echoes in the dark.